Hey, the U.S. Constitution is allowed to be amended, but our founding fathers didn't want just any kind of laws being thrown in there, and so they made it a very high bar. So if you want to change the Constitution in some way, you're talking about changing the foundational document. And in order to do so, it's going to be very difficult. So you want to put in your notes, these are how the Constitution can be amended. It needs to start with either a 2/3 vote by the House and Senate. So this is our Congress. Both the House side and the Senate side of our Congress need to vote at a 2/3 majority. So it cannot just be a 50-50, but 66% of both houses have to vote that they should do this. From there, it then goes to the state legislatures. Remember, we're the United States of America, and so the power is vested in the states. And so 3/4 of the state legislatures then have to agree to this idea, and then it can change the Constitution. So you're talking about 75% of our states have to agree before this actually happens. If we go over here to the Constitutional Convention, by 2/3 of the states can also start this process, and then 3/4 of the states have to agree to it. So if the states themselves don't agree that Congress is representing them fairly, they can call for a constitutional convention, and that's where all the states send representatives, and they then hash out what they think the new amendments to the Constitution should be. It then goes back to those states, and they agree on it, or they turn it down. Okay? So it's going through our representatives that are voted on here, and then also over here it's going through our state representatives, and then again back to the state representatives. So a lot of power is put into the states when it comes to changing the Constitution. All right. Since our Constitution has been formed, there's been 11,000 proposals to change the Constitution, and in all, only 27 have actually been accepted. Of those 27, the first 10 were known as the Bill of Rights. So originally we had a constitutional convention as we're fighting the Revolutionary War, and towards the end they come up with some ideas. We get the Articles of Confederation. We find those aren't very adequate, they're too weak, so we go to a constitutional convention in how to fix things and change things. And this second constitutional convention, they hash out what's going to be our new constitution that we're studying here. And in the process, many of the states say no, they don't want it. They want some guaranteed rights put in there. And so they go back and they rework it and say, okay, here's our amendments to the Constitution, and those are the first 10. That is known as the Bill of Rights, and that's put forward, and then the states say, yeah, we agree to it now. So the first 10 amendments are known as the Bill of Rights. There's only been 17 more that came after that. So this is a very high bar if you're going to change the Constitution. All right? Some of the things regarding this is that we could in our lifetimes actually see some major changes, because the United States has a huge debt load. We've got very different policies. Our country is fracturing along conservative and progressive lines, and so because of that, many people are self-segregating, as in they're moving, conservatives to a state like Texas, liberals to a state like California. People are self-segregating, and so within those states you have very different points of view. And I believe Texas tried to call for a constitutional convention a few years ago so that they could rewrite things and hopefully convince the other states to join them. It never happened, but the call was there, and that was interesting. Just recently, this is 2020, for this video, David Axelrod, I believe, is the campaign manager for Joe Biden, and they were gaming different scenarios, and he was saying, well, what if Biden isn't declared the winner? How about if we just don't concede the election and we try and convince the West Coast to secede from the Union? Okay, so this is a pretty serious thing. Something that hasn't happened since the Civil War. So secession was actually talked about as part of the strategy there. In a constitutional crisis, when we don't know who's president and we keep counting and recounting the votes, I believe it's kicked over to the House of Representatives to vote on it. The House will then say, hey, we're going to vote for it. Joe Biden because the Democrats control the House, but they don't have a supermajority of 2/3, and oh my goodness, it could be a mess. And so the Senate's Republican, they would side with Trump. You've got a totally divided government. Does the military get involved? Was talked about in these strategy campaigns. So, whoa, that escalates quickly. And we're coming up on this election in a couple months. So, yeah, things could get very interesting as far as a constitutional crisis, and people are talking about that. Before you get too worried, however, our founding fathers did understand that there should be a time lag between someone is voted on as president and someone actually takes office as president. So we vote in early November, but we don't actually have our president take office until later in January. So between those times, we may not know who's the president, and we're going to be working on counting and recounting votes. The problem with that time period is because Americans have always expected to just know that day when the vote happens, and then in the evening, we have our new president. If they don't get that, they may be a little confused or upset, take to the streets, riot. Everyone's going to claim my person won, no, my person won, and the intervening time might be pretty chaotic. Might be a time of pretty bad chaos. So keep that in mind when you look at this and say, this is just some boring data about how to change the Constitution. It could very well impact your life and have a big impact on our country. Okay? So the final thing is that if we do have another constitutional convention, what would you want to see in the Constitution? What would you want to take out? What would you want to put in? How would you change the laws so that it would make your United States a better place? Okay, so be thinking about that for class.